Hey everyone, welcome back to the NetSuite podcast. I'm your host, Kendall Fisher, and I am so thrilled to say that I am back with our business and finance editor, Megan O'Brien, for another Office of the CFO episode. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Kendall. Thank you so much for having me on again. It's good to be back. We've had a couple exciting episodes together with some guests that have inspired me to really up my business game. And today's guest looks no different.
That is true. We are actually chatting with three-time CFO Chris Caprio, who is currently the CFO of Focus Technology and co-chair of the CFO Leadership Council for the Boston chapter.
That's right. We're going to dive into his career journey, his previous roles, the industries he's worked in, as well as the metrics that matter most to him as CFO, and the way he's handled and continues to handle economic volatility and the things he's thinking about right now.
Yes, he'll dive into the importance of looking at the macro, how technology like NetSuite plays a major role in his strategic planning and decision-making, and why putting people first has been at the core of his success. I'm excited to dive in, Megan, so let's not wait another second. Our interview with Chris Caprio is coming up right after this.
You're listening to the NetSuite podcast, where we discuss what's happening within NetSuite, why we're doing it, and where we're heading in the future. We'll dive into the details about the software and the people at NetSuite who are behind all the moving parts. We'll also feature customer growth stories, discussing the ups and downs of running a company and how one integrated system can help your business continue to scale.
Hi, Chris. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I want to kick things off with a fun way to start. What's an interesting fact about yourself that you can share with the audience?
I have two dogs at home. I have a husky and a golden retriever. And then I also have three daughters who are all teenage daughters right now. So my house is a little crazy.
Oh, wow. That's fun. That's fun though. I have a golden doodle myself. And Megan, don't you have a golden retriever or is it a lab?
He's a golden retriever. Yeah.
Look at that.
A lot of energy.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, Chris. So I want to dive right in here. You've been in finance for the better part of 2 decades. Did you always know you wanted to get into finance? And if so, why?
Yeah, I think I did. My dad was in finance, and just having him, around the house, back before laptops, he used to bring work home with him, and I always had an interest in what was going on. He always had, the equivalent of reports and spreadsheets, printed out with numbers on them. And I always used to ask him questions. He used to have papers piled high. Certainly, loved to kill trees back in the day. And, just being around him and learning a lot, and ended up in high school, going to work with him, helping him out a few times with, payroll and invoicing. So, it led me to why I went to college, and kind of had a belief that that's where I would end up.
Well, speaking of college, you studied accounting at Providence College, and then you got an MSA in accounting from Bentley University. Can you explain what's the difference between an MBA and an MSA?
It was a lot cheaper.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that response.
Right when I came out of school, Massachusetts changed the ruling where if you did want to sit for the CPA, you needed at least 30 credit hours, and you can attain that by getting an MSA versus an MBA, which is 40 or more credits. So it was less credits. Of course, I got my master's. I did not go on to get my CPA, but those are the two reasons why I decided to do that.
And in talking to finance executives or budding ones, do you tell them to go this route? Why or why not?
Certainly anybody I talk to that is either in school or recently out of school, I would absolutely, if it works monetarily and they're able to do it. I did it nights and weekends. But I do believe, in a master's degree, not just from the perspective of, it improves your resume. But I think, I was 18, 19, 20 when I was in college. It was just school to me. I didn't take it as seriously as I probably should have. But taking a couple of years off, going back and getting my master's degree, it is really geared towards life after college, business scenarios, projects, presentations, really, industry-based. Professors are typically from industry. So it definitely helped get me prepared for management leadership roles and board meetings, presentations to large groups, things like that. I think it extremely helped me out in my career for sure.
We've asked that question several times on this series, and that is a really great way. No one has articulated it like that. I think that's a great way to put it. So I appreciate that. And speaking of your kind of journey into financial leadership roles, this episode is part of a series called Office of the CFO, where we really dive into how CFOs got into their roles. So now that we've heard a bit about your educational background, let's dive into your career history. Briefly, I know we could talk probably for forever about this, but briefly, what roles led you to taking on your first CFO title?
Yeah, I was working for a public software company right at the tech bust in 01, 02. And it was a situation when I started, I was only there about 18 months. And I was in a department of like 15 people. Our stock was in the, 250, 300 a share, something like that. And everything went downhill. And I know it sounds crazy, but the fortunate thing is I didn't get laid off. We had 4 or 5 rounds of layoffs, and I ended up with 3 or 4 people left in the department from 15. And of course, I took on more workload, but I was probably 24, 25 at the time, and just did so much for a public company. I think that helped. Many people can do things for different companies, but getting involved in 10K, 10Qs, and also payroll and all aspects of the close. I think in such a short period of time, I think it led me to move on and get a controller role probably earlier than I normally would have. And I think that certainly helped me springboard into my first CFO role in about 2010.
So in the companies you've worked for prior to your current role, did you focus in any particular industry or have roles like in a variety of industries, and what impact would you say that had? Like, did you stick to kind of tech?
No, I think the fortunate thing is I've been all over the place. I've worked in, tech, I've worked in energy, I've done engineering companies, B2B, B2C roles, and was able to move around. And the same, it goes for, I've worked for a startup, I've worked for a public company in the US, I've worked for a public company in France. I mean, I was based here, but it was a French public company. I've worked for private equity, I've worked for a private company, individual owners. And I think, for me, certainly I'm sure people have had success staying in healthcare or staying for large public companies. But for me, where I am today, having those various roles in different industries, you get to see things differently. You deal with different people, internationally, nationally. I've worked for, like I said, international companies. I've worked for companies that, I never left 60 miles around me here in the Boston area. So I think just having that diverse background over the last 20 plus years has definitely helped me.
Do you think it's different for people now? Like, what would you recommend for someone who aspires to be a CFO who's early in their career today?
I mean, certainly my belief would be my route would be more difficult today. I think, access to data, LinkedIn profiles and reading your resumes and seeing that, companies may have an affinity that, well, I want to hire somebody that has healthcare experience or tech experience or startup experience, and then, maybe able to grow faster to get to that CFO level. So my thoughts would be, it would be easier to stay in a single industry or a single type of company because you never have to, relearn that aspect of the company. But I wouldn't trade anything. I'm glad I did what I did. And I think it allows me to really apply for and do any type of job in any type of industry that I want to do.
So early in your career, you mentioned that you became a controller. Briefly, can you explain what that role entails and what skills do you need to be successful in it?
Yeah, I think definitely controller to me is more, accounting focused, understanding GAAP, understanding, your monthly close and processes around that, how to speed up the close, how to, definitely the first experience I had with really being at the foresight of management, whether it's a board, whether it's the management team. They're looking for your data, and everybody knows the controller, to me, is the one responsible for the month-end close. So what are how did we do? What are we forecasting to do over the next period of months? And I think those skill sets, from a technical perspective, and then from a soft skills perspective, patience. As much as I always had my monthly close checklist, and engineers are going to get their timesheets in by this date, project managers are going to approve invoices, and I'm going to close fixed assets, and the AP person is going to close AP. As much as we had that, over the course of a year, you very rarely hit the same date, certainly at small and middle market businesses. So being able to adjust and pull levers to make sure the end result, let's say a 6-day close or an 8-day close, whatever it is, that's still attained, but making sure you're flexible in where as the control you need to dive in. Maybe some months I had to help AP out. Other months I had to help with GL, fixed asset entries or revenue entries. You're kind of moving around, and you really got to learn it all in order to manage it all.
So how did your role as controller help you step into a CFO position?
Certainly as a CFO, cash is king, I think, and learning some of that early on from a controller, understanding the financials and the balance sheet of that organization. You really don't have to worry about that, learning that. You already know that as moving up from a controller to a CFO. So it certainly, helped in that regard. And then also, as a controller, maybe I was fortunate, but I always got pulled into meetings with the CFO, with management, the CEO, to review, all right, show me last month's results, show me next month's forecast. So, being able to be prepared to answer tough questions, because, why did this account go up or down? Why did that account, change so dramatically? Being able to do that analysis to present to a board or to a management team, definitely helped prepare me for what's expected of a CFO.
Well, now that you've held CFO roles for over a decade, you've worked hand in hand with controllers. How have you witnessed the role of the controller change?
I think like anything in finance, so certainly, my thoughts of growing up a controller is around, like I said, the close and cash forecasting. But I think now, a lot of companies don't, certainly small ones, don't have separate financial, planning or financial analysis departments, finance departments. So I think at least certainly my controller here and what I was expected to do, branch out into that analytics side, not just close the books, but take the next step of, why did we miss budget or make budget? What are some of the levers we can pull because our forecast revenue is going to be higher or lower. So I think it helps. They've become a lot more accepted and looked to for that analysis side and that detailed reporting side that maybe, a lot of companies in the past had completely separate departments.
So you were in your controller role at Altran through the 2008-2009 recession, and then moved into the CFO role pretty quickly thereafter. What advice can you share from that for finance leaders right now?
I think for the first time that I can remember in my career, I started paying attention to macro. I think I was too young, probably in 01, 02 in my career, to understand the tech bubble and what was going on, the impact of a lot of that. So I just didn't, know any better. But certainly 08, 09, not just the impact of those, the macroeconomic situation on my company, but just in general, what does it mean to raise and lower interest rates from the Fed? And what does it mean for other decisions that may cause inflation or may cause, global versus domestic versus regional? I think I started paying attention and feel I've continued to do that, which I think helped with COVID and through the last couple of years. But I think being able to look beyond your company and say, okay, for the better part of the first 8 or 9 years of my career, I only looked at, well, here's my company. Did we miss revenue? Did we make revenue? Are we selling to customers? All those type of metrics, where here's a situation in 08, at least, the first time in my mature part of my career, that there's nothing I could have done. I mean, there's this global economic downturn going on, and nothing that myself and my team did to impact that. But we have to react to it. We have to continue as a business. We had to, unfortunately make some layoffs. We had to decide, what decisions we wanted to make. And I think for the first time, okay, well, let me look at this macro environment, read up on it, listen to things like Bloomberg, read the Wall Street Journal, things that I normally, didn't do before that I felt I had to now do, because I realized for the first time, all these things impact my business. And I never really thought about that.
When you're talking about some of these decisions you made, what do you feel you got right during that time?
We valued people. We were in a services business, all trans engineering services company, and we did whatever we could to keep as many good people as we can. And we had to. Certainly, like I said, we had to get rid of some, but we made whatever decisions we could make in the office space, travel, anything, any other areas, even benefits to some extent, that we could, to keep, even if it was 2 or 3 people, that we made some of these decisions and felt, we couldn't cut that core. And I think it helped us in 2010, 2011, when the economy started turning around. We showed loyalty to these resources. And then when work picked up and we needed those resources, it was much easier to get back into some of those business lines and grow that business, because we were able to keep those extra few resources here or there. So I think, that was a decision we made as a management team, and it definitely helped us out as we grew out of the economic downturn.
Well, and I think that it comes full circle to 2020 when people thought we were going into a recession and made major cuts, and then struggled during, the workforce shortage, following thereafter. So it's interesting to hear that some of the, best CFOs we've talked to have said the same thing. We put our people first, and that was, in the end, that was super beneficial. So interesting to hear that come full circle. Going back there really quick before we are going to dive into some of the decisions you've made over the past couple of years, but going back to that time, what process, data, technology, what was critical in navigating that climate, being able to make the decisions to, keep your people and cut costs elsewhere?
I think it was really around recruiting. So I think what we did, I had this recruiting team, and same, with all departments, we tried to keep as many people as we could in all areas. So yes, clearly we weren't hiring a bunch of people, but we kept enough recruiters that we knew, all right, 8, 10, whatever % of people were getting laid off. And certainly that was happening in our industry. Let's start that database of candidates. We feel confident at some point, this economic downturn is going to turn around and we're going to have to hire people. Let's be ahead of it. Who got laid off? What skill sets they have, and build our database of resumes by not just doing reactive recruiting by, putting a job posting out there, but doing proactive recruiting, looking at, whether it's LinkedIn, which is becoming pretty popular then, or some other tools that are out there, even regional networking events and networking groups that were in the engineering space, to get our recruiters out there, and certainly managers as well, and just make connections and try and be ready to have that pipeline of candidates available when projects did come up. And we were fortunate in that area that we were dealing internationally. It was an international company. So, Europe got into economic decline a little after the US, and it lasted longer than the US got back. So we were able to shift some resources around by going through that process and having some global opportunities for people. But I think we did a good job with keeping our recruiters talking with candidates, even if we really didn't have a position available at that moment.
And as Kendall mentioned, you then took on the CFO role at Altran in 2010. What were kind of the key differences between the CFO and the controller role?
Definitely on the strategic side. I mean, as a controller, it was all around, the reporting and the accurate reporting and timely reporting and the close and managing to that. And I think, as I got promoted, so did my assistant controller, who became controller. So that certainly helped. But he was ready and he took on a lot of that. So I didn't have to worry about that. So I got into more talking more with other members of the management team, what they needed, process changes that maybe we want to put in place, dealing with other departments, going out to the field. We had offices throughout the country, and was able to travel and go to those offices and meet with those people. So I think that gave me a better affinity for what we truly did as a business at the detail, individual level, understanding, meeting with some customers just to learn the business better. And I think that's what I was able to do early on in my CFO career. And I think that stayed with me through today.
So it's interesting you said when we're talking strategy, what KPIs or metrics are most important as a CFO that maybe differ from a controller? Because that sometimes it's hard to track some of the stuff you're doing at a higher level, like when you're meeting with these customers and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's certainly, as a general statement, it's different by industry, no doubt, but there are definitely some that, at least through my career, have stayed. In some are around collections, DSO. If we're invoicing customers, whether they're, I've worked in B2B or B2C, we're getting paid timely. That's huge, and that's not going to change. So making sure you track metrics around that. What we're burning or what's our cash forecasting. So now I'm collecting this cash. What am I projecting 60 days, 120 days, 2 years out from a cash flow perspective? And another big one around debt covenants. So again, most of the companies I've worked at, we've had some sort of debt covenant arrangement with a bank or with a third party. So those are huge, making sure any decisions we make that are large in nature doesn't impact those covenants that are really the lifeline for the debt we have outstanding or potentially future debt we need to go out and acquire companies or make investments. And then certainly there's tons below that start to get industry based, whether you're a services company or product company or inventory company that, will change from job to job.
What are some of the KPIs that you've clung to throughout your career that maybe are less known or paid attention to, but are still really important?
I've always had a lot around people. So, certainly as a CFO or controller, you're always looking at KPIs around the financial metrics of the business. But I've always brought with me from a people perspective, meaning, what's our staff size? What was it that we planned on from a budget perspective for staff size? And what is it actual throughout the year? What are our recruiting methods? Where are we finding our people? So all my recruiters always track, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's employee referral, we get customer referrals. I mean, there's many different ways that we hire people, what method we use. So just tracking that to make sure we're getting good ROI on those tools. And then the general cost per hire. So I'm taking all my tools, all my recruiters, and what does it cost me to go find people? So I know, next year, if I'm going to hire 10 people, what it's going to cost me to hire those 10 people. So I've always kept that. And to me, in any business that's, at least expecting to grow, that can carry forward regardless of what your P&L looks like.
And through all of this, how has technology made your job and the job of the CFO in general easier or harder, and what specific ways?
I hope the answer is for most would be easier, but I understand the harder because more is expected. There's more data, more access to data. So that's certainly a good thing if used properly. But harder in, I don't know, like when you answer, I don't know, meaning we haven't even pulled that data yet, or I don't know where to get that data in the short term. You're kind of looked at like, why don't we have that data? So I guess at times, from a board perspective, it can be harder, but I would definitely say easier, less in Excel, more running reports, more looking at dashboards to be able to, where back in, I remember early in my career, for the most part, if you wanted anything, you were using Excel, you were creating formulas, and it took, whether it's a half hour, an hour, a day, 2 days, whatever. Now you're eliminating a lot of that, much of that, and you just hit a button. And as long as you set up your dashboard correctly, I get the information. Now it's a matter of how good am I and how quick can I be to make decisions around those.
So yeah, let's come full circle to today. Tell us a bit about your company now. What does your company do?
So yeah, Focus Technology, we're in the IT consulting, managed services, and equipment reselling space. We help any company, small, medium, large, with their either fully outsourced IT or co-sourcing their IT. Do a lot around cybersecurity, do a lot around cloud, do a lot around AWS, Azure environments, hardware, Dell and Cisco environments, and have a lot of great engineers that can design and help customers utilize this technology moving forward.
Now, just hearing the description of the company, I can't help but think how crazy that must be, especially right now, just because there's such rapid advancements in technology. You've had people and companies go remote. You have all these concerns over cybersecurity that have really been proliferating. What are the unique challenges that you face in general and also specifically kind of today?
Yeah, you said, number one, number two, and number three seems to be cybersecurity for sure. Not just from an internal perspective, which myself and our management team is responsible for maintaining the cybersecurity profile and mitigating risk for Focus Technology, but there are 250 plus customers that either we directly or indirectly support them in their overall technology, which includes cybersecurity. So many of them are looking to us to determine what should they do. They don't have any, or they have limited internal IT knowledge. So they're looking at us to help them walk to their CEO, walk to their board, and answer the question, are we doing all we can to mitigate risk from a cyber perspective? And that's our goal, and that's definitely a big part of what we do really the last 5 years, but certainly in the last 12 to 24 months. It's what all we see customers want to talk about, and at least start with, before we get into any of the technology improvements we can make to help them with their business. It starts with, how do I secure my environment?
And how are you overcoming some of these challenges? I have to imagine, especially considering all the emphasis on cybersecurity and the fact that attacks are coming from new, more sophisticated sources. Can you delve into that a little?
Yeah, we're what I would call a small business. So, we have to rely on not only a good chunk of our budget to hire the right people, but also our partners and our vendors that we use, because we're using their technology as well. We're mainly just a services company. So our engineers are going out and looking at different tools and services and software that's out in the market to figure out for different industries what's the best way to help mitigate their risks. So, we have to rely on them, but we have to stay on top of them to make sure we're getting information. If there's an incident that goes on with them, we can't just wait till stuff becomes public. We need to be close enough with our vendors that they're informing us much earlier than anybody in the public knows, so we can identify what impact that would have on our business.
How did 6 out of the top 7 best performing tech stocks gain visibility and control over financials, inventory, planning, and budgeting with NetSuite by Oracle? Answers at netsuite.com/code. netsuite.com/code.
So kind of understanding what the company does now, what does a typical day in your shoes look like? How do you fit into this whole ecosystem?
Yeah, I wish there was a typical day. I guess that's why I like my job so much, because it really isn't.
Yeah.
Again, being a CFO of a small business, I oversee our finance and accounting team, obviously, but I also oversee HR and recruiting, let's say our legal strategy, overall strategy, our investments and our, working with our bank and things like that. So it's really month to month as far as, reviewing with the team what needs to be done, but also understanding what our strategy is, what our goals are, and how we're, moving towards them. I would say, my kids see me on a lot of calls when they were doing remote schooling. So,
Yeah.
I guess a day in the life is spending probably half the day, at least, on calls with different departments or different vendors, just getting updates or providing them updates with what's going on. And the rest of the day is looking at ways that, whether it's our, simple as our benefits to our P&L, to our customer base, how we can grow and improve and continue to be looked at as a important vendor for our customers and an important employer for employees that we have, and certainly ones we're looking to recruit.
So when you're kind of looking, I know it changes, but when you look at the typical functions of the CFO, how much of your time, let's say in percentages, would you say you spend on core accounting and finance versus management and leadership tasks versus strategic projects?
I would say, 10-15% at most is on the traditional, accounting and finance. That's really left up to my controller and her team. And then of the rest, certainly majority around strategy, probably 60% around strategy. Now it could be, again, high level strategy on direction of the company, or it could be just simply reviewing whether it's our insurance, property and casualty, or benefit insurance, things like that. But what's in the market and how we can better utilize those. And then the other 30-35% on management and leadership, both with my team, but I'm also responsible for other employees of the company, making sure they're managers and leaders, being oversight of HR and our newly rolled out career path that we have, getting those employees to understand where they fit in, what direction they want to go in. So helping them as they develop within their careers.
It's amazing that you're able to fit that in with everything else. That's a sign of a great leader. How has this changed over the past, let's call it 2.5 years amid the pandemic? I mean, has it always been like 10 to 15% and then majority strategy, 30-35% on leadership, or has that shifted over the last couple of years?
I think it shifted, and then now it shifted back. So I would say that was a pretty good breakdown pre-COVID. And I think it's now back to that, but absolutely, at least in the first 12 months, in 2020 or so, it definitely shifted to less strategic, because it didn't, who could think about 5 years down the road or 3 years down the road? So that probably dropped to 5 or 10%. The accounting side probably stayed, although I did get a lot of, was involved a lot in the PPP process. And I would say that, dealt with a lot of, day-to-day accounting type things, but definitely the biggest part was in the management and leadership, giving our employees the confidence that we were, we're in IT, we were sending people out to offices every week, so how are we making sure they're safe? How are we watching out for them? How are we informing them if there was, a case that came up, albeit through them, and informing the right employees that we had to, or the customer? We had a couple of cases where we went to a data center and the customer sent somebody that later tested positive. So it was just managing that process, which I'm sure many people did. And then just, certainly give our employees the confidence that, hey, I know it's a tough environment, what's going on. You see a lot of companies closing or having to make decisions that are difficult with their employee base, making them feel confident that, look, we've prepared for this. We have, sufficient funds to continue to operate as an organization. And we're confident that, we're going to monitor the economic and environmental situation around us, but we're in a good spot. We feel we've made the right decisions and just left an open door, so that year or so after March 2020 was definitely a shift, but I think certainly, definitely end of 2021 and absolutely now it's kind of back to, what we were hoping to do in 2019 heading into 2020.
And how do you think your role is going to continue to evolve? Obviously, we're looking at some uncertain times ahead and preparing for that. So where do you see your role going from here?
I mean, I think that the time from an accounting finance perspective will continue to decline. Even at my controller level and below, we continue to look at ways to automate our processes around accounts payable, accounts receivable, invoicing, collections, payment applications, things like that. So I think as that more automates, we're going to get even more data. I would say still sticking to what we feel is important to look at with that data and understand that some of it is just great. We're faster in doing something, but we don't need to make strategic decisions around everything. We need to, continue to focus on what's important to us. And now hopefully we have a little bit more time because we're doing less processing and more analyzing.
I love that you've talked a lot about how you do rely on your controller, and that's pretty heavily. And that's something that we've heard from a lot of CFOs. And that's also something we've heard that's what's shifted a bit more. CFOs are relying more on their controllers today than let's say, 10 to 15 years ago,
Sure.
To focus more on strategy. But what part of your job can't be delegated, and has to be done by you? And it can be specific to your company.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think there are certainly things that currently I am only doing now, but I'm sure with time and training, other people could do it. But definitely around our banking relationship and our metrics as far as covenants. Again, I have confidence my team could do it. It just happens to be something that on a week-to-week basis I'm dealing with because, we've done some acquisitions. We want to continue to do some acquisitions. So having access to capital and knowing what level of access we have to capital to, what price we can pay for a target. So I think all around our covenant compliance and our banking relationships is definitely the biggest area that, really today, pretty much only I deal with.
Well, so bringing it back to today, what are your top priorities right now?
Probably everything everybody's hearing, but
Yeah.
for the business we're in, I mean, supply chain, chip shortages is significantly impacting our business. And then, certainly we've been fortunate enough to grow. We've grown about 25-30% headcount during COVID. So finding that talent. So on the chip shortage side and the supply chain side, I mean, we're a reseller of equipment. Going back a couple of years, we'd order something from someone like a Dell or a Cisco. They'd give us a 3-week, 2-week, 4-week, whatever it was. They were within a couple of days. We could plan our engineers around it, being on site, migrating data, all that goes into depending on what type of equipment it is. Now we get a date. It's going to be probably 3 to 6 months out, and it's a moving target. It could miss by months. They could tell us 4 months and it would take 6. They could tell us 6 months and it takes 3. Just the whole, uncertainty around that makes managing the business difficult because we could place a few orders, think we need to hire a few people, but that's based on a timing of delivery that may not be even within the same month or quarter. So that's definitely been the most challenging. It's kind of all related in that supply chain hiring side. But that's without a doubt the most challenging thing, which makes forecasting difficult. And again, going back to covenants, if something ships in June and we thought it was going to ship in April, you're looking at 2 months delay in a revenue, and it could be a material deal.
I think supply chain issues has become like a party topic at this point. Every time I'm talking to someone, somehow I'm like, supply chain issues.
I get in a fight with my boyfriend and I'm like, supply chain.
Yeah.
So many businesses right now, they're focused on bottom line improvement, automation, and efficiency. As a services business, does the same go for you? And how do you prepare for economic volatility?
Ooh, yeah, I mean, certainly automation is big. We're looking at continuous ways from, around accounting specifically, but also within our managed services practice, how we handle tickets and how we monitor our customers' environments, how we can automate that, whether it's full automation or even moving to chat, various different things we're doing and continuously looking at. to help make the lower level jobs quicker, simpler, more accurate, and certainly automated. And that's, a big part of our focus in what we're doing today. It's difficult. I think, we've tried to take the worst case scenario situation when it comes to volatility, whether it's directly in our business or in a macro environment. A very conservative approach, I would say. Maybe not the most conservative, but definitely very conservative. It may, short-term impact growth in a specific area, but I think, we're looking at the business as a whole. We're confident in our growth. We have a lot of, we're fortunate that the business is heavy backlog based, meaning contracts signed months, weeks in advance that we're going to go out and perform. So I don't have a ton of immediate reaction that has to happen. So we monitor that volatility. If contracts used to take 3 months to sign, maybe it's taken 4 or 5 now. So it may slow down the process a little bit. But again, we're in a fortunate enough situation that we have a lot of visibility into our next quarter, we'll say. And that is limitedly impacted by a volatile environment, but certainly looking out further than a quarter, absolutely. We continue to monitor that on a rolling 90-day basis, but it's not easy for sure.
Yeah, it's just a simple question. How are you predicting the future? Right?
What crystal ball are you using?
Yeah.
Well, see, it's very simple because that used to mean 3 to 5 years, and now we're going 2 to 3 months. So yeah. I would say that's a big change. We're having our 3 to 5 year forecast for sure, but to that question, I'm joking, but certainly the window isn't as long as it used to be. I mean, obviously, no one knew COVID was going to happen. Certainly, you mentioned earlier, no one knew COVID was going to have as little short-term impact on certain industries as it did. I mean, certainly some industries got crushed, but certainly tech had, tremendous success. And now, obviously, the last 3 to 6 months with the macro environment, a lot of that's getting pulled back in. So our concerns are definitely much more 3, 6, 9 month focused and not as much, 3 to 5 year focused.
Well, so quicker, more accurate, more efficient. The business case for automation, it's pretty easy to state, right? But the implementation of it can sometimes be a little bit harder. So how are you implementing automation at your company?
Definitely. Obviously, we use NetSuite, and it's a good and bad thing. The bad thing is it's so popular and so great, which leads to the good thing that so many vendors want to, integrate with your tool. So it definitely gives us tremendous opportunity. There's almost no automation that doesn't interact, fully with NetSuite. And we're just going, for us, we started right around before COVID, but luckily right at the beginning with, we used to write a lot of checks and implemented a tool that automates AP where I may cut, 3 to 5 checks a year. I mean, really significantly dropped the amount of checks we cut. And just going online, we went to collections. We knew, collecting payments from customers through COVID would be an issue. So we implemented an automated process around collections. Now we're looking at, payment application and forecasting, where both of those are done either manual or in Excel. And those are the next steps. We're just trying to go, we're in a fortunate situation that we're growing as a company, our top line, our bottom line. So we have an ability to invest in certain things. And we continue to look at ways around accounting. And then also our managed services division, like I mentioned, around tools we're utilizing to monitor and manage our customers' environment. How can we automate those? How can we automate password changes? We get a lot of tickets around, I forgot my password, it locked me out, trying to get to a point, and we have it now where, a lot of that can be automated as long as the person, uses MFA to identify themselves. They can update that password without having a focus employee getting in the middle for most of the cases. Certainly sometimes we have to, but it was 0 before, and now it may be, less than 25%.
Well, you made this segue easy by mentioning NetSuite. So with 60% of your role being strategy, how are you using NetSuite to make those strategic decisions right now?
Oh, it's, especially looking at what we had. I mean, there was the tools we had prior, the accounting tools were, at best on a monthly basis, you'd get access to data, customer data, P&L data, forecasting, et cetera. I mean, NetSuite has allowed us to get just about every area of our business. We use it for CRM, so our sales team is in there, so I can see what deals are there and what dates they expect them to close, which, like I said earlier, can typically lead to when that revenue is going to be done, whether it's services or hardware shipping. Our obviously accounting and finance team is in there. We also use the connected project management tools. So all of our project managers and engineers are in there, putting in new projects, invoicing our customers, what milestones we've attained, obviously timesheets, so where we are from a percent complete basis on those projects. So I mean, where our last system was so isolated, a couple of us in accounting would be all that touch the system on a day-to-day basis. We have percent, maybe 75% of our employees touching NetSuite on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. That's giving us such timely information, and really, it's been great for us. It's been about 3 years since we implemented it, and it's completely changed our ability. I don't know what we would have done during COVID, honestly, without the access to the information that we had.
Can you give like any specific example of the impact that information made for your business? Like something maybe a way that you pivoted quickly amid COVID or something like that?
From a project perspective, so, in the past, we would have to wait till month end and people would submit timesheets, and then we would take another couple weeks to accumulate all that data, invoice our customers, and be able to obviously collect on those invoices. I think the biggest thing is the ability to send invoices basically daily. We typically before this sent some invoices during the month, but most of them were sent at month end. Now, as soon as a milestone's reached, the project manager, boom, clicks a button, says we hit the milestone, we run a process and an invoice through the automated collection processes in the customer's hands an hour after we attain the milestone, possibly, or the next morning or whatever. So, most customers pay on 30 days. So that 30 days starts so much sooner. So that's definitely been one area. And the other one is the integration of our sales, opportunity tracking to, the rest of our business. So before we had a separate non-integrated sales system. Sales reps put in their opportunities when they thought they were going to close, the revenue and GP on those opportunities, and it wasn't tied in. So we have to run that, match that against different reports, implement or set up invoices manually because there was no integration. Again, now being able to see that sales data, tell them, look, we're going to be looking at this at 2:00 today, make sure it's updated, and they're constantly updating it. So it's just been great.
It's awesome. That kind of brings me to, how do you track success in your CFO role? And how is NetSuite helping with this?
It's weird, but I would say maybe it's not weird. I don't know, but our employees, I look at our turnover rate. I look at, we do some surveying. There's some third parties that give away awards, including Boston Business Journal does Best Places to Work. We've won it 3 years in a row. That to me, obviously you need to have a successful business. You need to have cash to run a business, things like that. But at the end of the day, if we have intelligent employees who feel empowered and like to work here, say publicly to these third-party, surveys that they enjoy working here, refer their friends and family and other, contacts in their network to come work here, which we, like I said earlier, we track where people come from, and a significant percentage of them come from employee referrals. That to me says, we're running a successful company, and, us as a management team aren't doing everything perfect, but are making some good choices that people want to work here. And obviously we monitor the results of the business. So, we can see that that's easy to look at. But having good results and having, I would say, motivated and satisfied and great people to work with, I think is what I'm looking for in the end.
I'm sensing a theme here, Chris. You mentioned this when you worked at Altran going through the 2008-2009 recession. You mentioned that you really focused on people, and that's been a KPI that you've tracked consistently throughout your career. And now here at Focus, you've mentioned it again. So I'm curious, I know this is a Chris thing for sure, but is this type of, is this a shared vision of how success is measured across the company? Is it beyond you? Is this kind of how it goes for the entire organization?
Yeah, it's definitely built into our values. It's funny, I had 2 new hires start this morning. We go through a presentation with each of those, and it has our company values on there. And there are a lot around, helping community service, always doing the right thing, flexible and collaborative individuals. So we are very people oriented, especially in a service industry where, I'm not out all the time talking with customers. Obviously I do at times, but for the most part, it's the work product that we provide and the ease of working with us and the success of working with us that our customers feel. That's the lifeblood of our business. So, if we had our own product or hardware, or we sold cars or anything like that, maybe I would think differently. Maybe I wouldn't, but certainly in the industries I've been in, our people are representing the brand, are out there talking with customers, talking with other employees, talking with prospects, talking with vendors. There's so many pieces of our supply chain to our customers that they need to show that they're excited and want to work here, and the customer can see that in the work product that's provided. So yeah, I would like to believe that's top down, that's coming from our CEO, Doug Alexander, and coming to our management team. And I think all of us do as much as we can to promote that.
And you mentioned the key word, collaborative. What is your relationship and interaction with the CEO, COO, board of directors, any other executives like?
I believe it's great. I think it's constant. We have weekly scheduled meetings, but we have almost daily interactions. I think we've been fortunate that I think for the most part, our executive team and managers, are in the office a couple days a week. Most of our engineers and help desk and sales are, either home or at customer sites, but I think it's helped us come in. We're in the same office. You end up, talking more, I think, than we did for those few months that most of us were home. Luckily, I think we got back to at least a few people in the office pretty quickly. But I think that regular cadence is important. I think you just be honest and open about whatever situation there was. And, same thing with our board. I remember getting the question, March 20th or whatever it was, 2020 after COVID, the board asking, how much cash do we have? And, we did the calculation, June 1st, and that's based on nobody paying us and us not getting rid of any employees. So, I mean, that's, you got to give them tough information. Luckily, things change, customers paid. I mean, but on the first day of things happening, they're going to ask the tough questions, and you got to give them the honest and accurate answer.
And how are you using NetSuite still back then when you were, having to answer those tough questions, but even today, as we move forward into kind of a different beast, how are you using NetSuite to really back your decisions and your discussions?
I think it makes it so much easier. To be honest, that question would have taken me a week prior to NetSuite to truly give an honest answer. Versus now I had my sales, information in there. I had, obviously my cash rec in there. We had our employee headcount, what it cost us per month. I mean, so much was in there, and you could easily do more variable planning and analysis versus having to, download information from probably 5 different sources 3+ years ago to be able to answer those questions. So, again, it just, we're using it daily. We're pushing our team to make sure they're updating it daily, if not weekly, within their environment, whether it's sales or project management, and just to be able to do more analyzing of data, and certainly less entering of data in spreadsheets.
Well, so to conclude this conversation, you have done so much as a CFO and quite successfully. What is your advice for CFOs looking to be more successful in their roles?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to some of the things I learned after the 2008 crisis, learn about the macro. I think it is important to understand what's going on, at least in the business world from an economic perspective globally. Even if you think you just have a business in one town or one region, the impact of a global economy really does matter. We're so intertwined. So keeping up to speed and reading and listening about that. I found networking extremely important. Getting out and talking to any vendor or area that your business utilizes, meaning I'm out talking with people who know a lot about healthcare, people who know a lot about compliance and legal related issues that might be out there, and again, making time to talk with them just to hear what they're seeing. So when I'm going and giving a analysis in my opinion on something, it's not just my opinion, it's not just my data, it's data from the largest insurance company in the world, or whatever it might be. That again, you're out talking with people working in these different industries. Real estate, certainly the amount of people I've talked to in the real estate space over the last 2 years. What are other companies doing? What should we be doing? Who's letting people back to work? Certainly on the HR side, same thing. What are you doing at your company? It may be a company like ours, it may be a company in the same region as ours, whatever data I can get from them. And certainly, banking, other financing, private equity, venture capital, just talking with those types of companies to see what's out there. It's very easy to say, but maybe now we have to say, I used to say, get out of your office. Now maybe I need to say, get out of your home. But, talk with people that know more than you on all the areas that impact your business to educate yourself. And then I probably should have said first, but I'll end on this note, is talk to your team, not just your CEO, not just other C-level executives. Talk to sales reps. What are they struggling with? What's working? What's not? You implement new process out there. How's it going? Talk to some of the people that answer the phones on our help desk, specifically talking about Focus Technology, our engineers, getting feedback from them, giving them channels to not just me, but management, because we may think everything's fine and they may think it's a disaster, or vice versa. We think, gee, I don't think this is going well. Then you talk to them, no, it's great. We got a couple of things we need to, improve upon, but, it's working well. So, that's definitely important to get out and talk to really all these areas that impact your business, both internally and externally.
That's great, Chris. And we didn't get to chat about it, but we do know that you are the co-chair of the CFO Leadership Council of the Boston chapter. And we're going to drop your LinkedIn profile link in the description of this podcast episode. So if anybody wants to connect with you, to definitely make sure they're doing some of that networking beyond their home, as you put it, but also, beyond their business and into other industries, to really be able to talk about some of this stuff. That's great. And I'll make sure again that people are able to connect with you on that. And we really appreciate all the insight that you provided us today. This has been an awesome conversation, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Well, if people want to, but I don't know, but I appreciate it. Kendall, Megan, you guys are great. Thank you so much. Had a blast.
Wow, some really great stuff on this episode. In particular, it may seem simple, but his nod to focusing on macroeconomics, looking beyond your specific industry or region and really educating yourself on what's happening at a national and global level is really important. A young person in finance right now might not have that mentality, and I think it's a really great point. Megan, what about you?
I agree. And speaking of mentality, I really loved his emphasis on people in the business. I think in times of economic volatility, particularly recessions, there can be this inclination to cut headcount a lot. But our research has shown that it actually can backfire and inhibit both recovery and success further down the line. Instead, it seems to really be about building efficiency, implementing automation, and retaining your top talent, all of which he mentioned.
Yeah, that was great. So a big, huge thank you to Chris Caprio for joining us on this episode. Like I mentioned in the podcast, if you want to reach out to Chris on LinkedIn, we've left a link in the description of this episode, along with some other articles that relate to what we discussed today. And I also want to thank you, Megan.
Well, thank you, Kendall. I hope to be back again soon. It's always such a highlight in my day.
I love that. And last but certainly not least, I want to extend another thank you to our editing crew over at Lampstand. And as always, all of you for tuning in. If you want more episodes just like this one, make sure you subscribe to our channel and give us a rating and review. Thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
You just listened to the NetSuite podcast. Be sure to tune in every week with more NetSuite developments, stories, and insights into the benefits of one integrated system to help you run your business.